What I want to focus on with our guest this morning, Professor Kealeboga Maphunye, is on the national liberation movements. Now, we know the ANC is one of the African continent's oldest national liberation movements, and there's a lot of research about why movements in, different eras of their existence begin to lose support. At what point do they lose that disconnection with their people, with their support base? At what point have they failed to adequately transform into political movements from liberation movements? And what's the difference between those? So, Prof, I want to bring you in. So, prime examples, closest one nearest to us, of course, will be Zimbabwe, and that's the ZANU-PF. They came into power in 1980. It's a roller coaster ride in Zimbabwe, right? But the ZANU-PF is still in power there. But if we look at the Horn of Africa, for example, Djibouti, Eritrea, Ethiopia, and Somalia, they shook off the yoke of colonialism long before other countries on the African continent, but then they had problems between themselves and their own borders rather than colonial powers. Ethiopia, the largest and most powerful state in the Horn, never colonized. It was occupied by Italy for those years, 36 to 41, I think it was. And then South Sudan, the latest that we're seeing, seceding from Sudan in 2011, yet we see this massive civil suffering and human suffering that's happening in Sudan. Talk to us about the story of national liberation movement, and then bring it home to South Africa and what the ANC might have failed to see.
Yeah, Iman, much has been written by scholars, researchers, looking at these things. But in short, they say it normally takes about 2 to 3 decades for these African national liberation movements, to plateau. In other words, they reach the top, 30 years, 25 years, 30 years, and then they start going down. Why do they say that? Because at the beginning, they are so appealing. They bring a euphoric political moment to the nation, whereby everyone actually is literally eating from their palms. Because remember, these are the parties that are bringing in liberation, freedom. I'm not so sure about emancipation, because this is what we are still waiting for in South Africa. But then, somewhere along the lines, they start going, they're having a political detour. They move away from that trajectory whereby they have been promising the people freedom, liberation, and so on. They start dipping their hands into the cookie jar. Corruption still starts coming in. Greed still starts coming in. So over the years, we have seen this, unfolding. You can talk about, liberation movements such as, Frelimo in Mozambique, MPLA in Angola, and of course the one for South Africa, including ZANU-PF. You talked about it. PAIGC in Cabo Verde, and Guinea, those areas in West Africa. But the story is still there. They tend to be very, very energetic. They tend to be obviously holding being the torchbearer, the national torchbearers, bringing the flag and the national anthem. But at the end of the day, it looks like they're only there to give us flag independence and the national anthem, whereas the development goes down under.
Ooh,
so,
ouch, Prof.
so that has been the story. Of course, we mustn't forget that they have tried to improve here and there. Some of them, unfortunately, because of the IMF, World Bank conditionalities that tells them how to govern these countries, have been in a fix because they cannot implement their policies. We have to be fair to them. But overall, it's a steep hill. In South Africa, bringing closer to home, the African National Congress has surprised us because we are now talking 30 years of independence. They have surpassed the two and a half decades that I was talking about, but we are in the third decade, and you can see they are not getting, will they get 50%? We are struggling to about that 50%, which means that the voters or the citizens are not so very happy about certain things that they are bringing in. But of course, they are still prepared to give them the vote, hence we see that they are still in the majority because they are the party of liberation. They are here mostly because of the patriotism, one could say, about being the party that ushered in freedom, not only the only one, of course, we know.
So there's a romanticism.
Yeah, we know there's AZAPU and the Black Consciousness Movement and so on that also should be credited for that. But there's romanticism, there's patriotism. Some people voted because of their heart to say, well, I'm still going to vote for a party, even though I'm not happy for about it. So there are those dynamics. But liberation parties overall, their performance 2-3 decades after tends to start going down. Eventually they're out. We know the story of Zambia, UNIP, United National Independence Party of Kaunda, KK, the famous KK. It has been defeated, and then since then it has been replaced by 2 more parties. that some people thought would never happen because it was a party of liberation. So it can happen, and in as much as it happened there, it can happen here in South Africa. But I'm glad that the South Africans are beginning to think that they have to vote wisely. And that might mean not voting for a party that you have always voted for traditionally, even if it fails you. Yeah.
This is again so powerful, and I'm so glad that our viewers are listening in, because it is a masterclass in understanding the intricacies of massive movements like the ANC and what their historical and contemporary fates have been. What happens when liberation parties fail to liberate? And if you look under the hood of South Africa, the numbers are really, really bad. You've got the Living Conditions Survey, one of the latest pieces of information from Stats SA, which talks about approximately half, this is 49.2% of the adult population in our country living below the upper bound poverty line. Yeah. That is a massive indictment, as you say. What happens beyond the flag? What happens beyond the national anthem? Of course, we've had successful macroeconomic policies in the country. We've had your RDP, the NDPs, and such, to ensure that there is institutional and systemic change in the country. But the yield has been lacking, and some of those goals and targets haven't been met. When you think about safety and security, when you think about access to electricity,
what about GBV?
And GBV,
very important for South Africa.
A massive scourge in the country. I mean, during the course of our broadcast, how many more women would have been abused? How many more women would be raped and killed in our country? It really is a sad thing. And this is where the sobering part of our conversation comes in. Beyond the hubris, I hate the word hubris because it can be, a little bit pejorative. But beyond the hubris of all the party promises and the excitement of what we're experiencing here, lies all of those stories. And am I going to wake up in a different South Africa tomorrow? Am I really?
That is the big question. What does the future hold for us now that we are definitely going into coalition? It looks like the state is set. I don't know how many votes have been counted so far, but if it stays the same, Iman, it looks like the state is set for a coalition government. And so is it going to be chaos? Is it going to be instability, as we have seen in the metros? Is it going to be compromise that is going to lead to a semblance of order, as the parties that were here earlier seem to be indicating? This is where it is important, because at the end of the day, these parties have been voted into power by the citizens of South Africa, and the citizens out there would like to see political order leading to job creation, instability, and of course the economy growing, the rand also rising. That's what the South Africans want to see.
Prof, I want to bring your comparative brain into things again. Sorry, I've got this sort of beeping in my head. There was something I wanted to ask you, and the thought has just evaporated.
It will come back. It will come
evaporated
back.
Like mist. But again, so here we are, and there is a responsibility to deliver an election result, and we know that hopefully by the very latest that happens on the 2nd of June. And I want, again, your comparative brain, the thoughts come back, thank you very much, is on other governments across the African continent post-elections where they haven't had a parliament. They've had a hung parliament, some of that stretching into months. That's led to violence and suspicion and a number of other incidents that frustrate the democratic project. Scenario plan for us in South Africa, because if that scramble is on and that those coalitions have to be sought in terms of who governs, what are you thinking is the likely outcome?
There are two key words there, Iman. Government with a T at the end and governance with a CE at the end. Let's start with the government. It normally is there for 5 years. We know once the party goes into power or the candidates are elected into office, and they have to be there for 5 years, for as long as they are not voted out. They are removed by their parties, because remember we've got the party list system where the party can recall you. We have seen it happening with our own former president Thabo Mbeki, that kind of thing. So the party list system also has to be taken into consideration. So it does affect the way government is going to run, also how these parties are going to behave and the candidates behave in government. But then when it comes to governance, this is the process, Iman, which goes wall to wall from election year after election year, whereby it can be quite messy, because citizen Iman and citizen Kealeboga sitting there out there in some remote area is expecting effective and efficient government and the delivery of services. They don't want to know whether the parliamentarians is from which political party. Once parliament and government has already been formed, they just want service delivery, and they don't care whether they are at the local government level, provincial level, or national. They don't care about those things. They just see one seamless thing called government. This is where now the politicians have got to be sober to remember that the bigger picture is actually government and effective and efficient governance, which is uninterrupted and which is not marred by corruption, by the appointment of cronies into those positions and so on. We want professionalism, professional civil service, public service. Many other countries, for instance Mauritius, for instance Botswana, they've shown us that it can be done, whereby these people are coming in there, Iman, to deliver services. They are not politicians. They should not be carrying the party card once they are in those government positions. This is where the difficulty comes in for South Africa. Sometimes they tend to cloud the two, they tend to mix the two, and then we have an explosive, undesirable situation.
Prof, I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about your answer to the next question, is who is the president of South Africa following all of this horse trading? Let's talk about some scenarios when it comes to that in just a moment. We will continue to keep you close to the action here at the Results Operations Center.